In this lesson, we'll begin the process of retouching the face by removing major blemishes. So let's go ahead and begin. All right, so here is the image that we're going to be working with throughout the duration of this course. It's basically a photo of an older gentleman. I would say he's probably early to mid-50s in age. And what we're going to be doing is turning back time and peeling away several years from his face to make him appear as if he's in his late 30s, perhaps approaching 40. Now, I do believe that there's a certain threshold that you really don't want to cross over when it comes to doing something like this. For example, I wouldn't want to take this photo of this man here and try to make him appear as if he's a teenager. It just wouldn't come out very well. So keep that into account. Ultimately, you want to put into consideration what does your client want and what's really appropriate for them. So would you really need to go back as far as 10 or 15 years as far as retouching an image like this? Perhaps not, but we're going to try and push it to that level just so we can show you all the different things that we can achieve here as we retouch and edit this photo. So really quick, have a look at our layers panel. Here you can see the original image layer right there. And then I've got a group that I've created entitled Retouching. All of our layers, everything we do will be within this group. So while we're here, let's go ahead and come down here and click on this button and create a new layer. And we're going to start off by focusing on some of these major blemishes that we can kind of see here as we navigate around the skin. Some of these little sunspots, just these different little bumps, as well as some rogue hairs. He's got a rather long eyebrow hair kind of curling up right there, and looks like we have some hair just kind of right there on the forehead. So we're going to be using the healing brush tool over here in our tool panel. Over the next several lessons, we'll be relying on that pretty heavily. Now, before we use this tool, come up here to the top of the interface, up here in your control panel. Look where it says Sample. Go ahead and switch that from Current Layer to All Layers. That way, when we are sampling pixels, we're able to sample from all of the layers beneath whatever layer we're currently on. And then let's go ahead and right-click, and it'll bring up our little dialog box here with some of the settings we can change for our tool. I'm going to go ahead and take down the hardness to about I'd say about 75%. That way it's just a little bit softer. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. So I'm going to kind of start with this little guy right here, that little bump. I'm going to hold down Alt and sample some skin right here that I like, and basically just heal that, painting right over it. So if you've kind of dabbled with some of these healing tools over here, you're probably wondering, well, what's the difference between the healing brush tool and, say, the clone stamp? Well, the healing brush tool is really useful because it puts into account the highlights and the shadows of whatever you're painting. And it only paints the color of your sampling area. Whereas the clone stamp is just going to flat out copy over, clone over whatever information you have to the area that you're trying to clone over. So it's not going to put any of that into account. So the healing brush tool, I really wouldn't try to use it on areas where you have a really sharp or defined edge, whereas with the clone stamp, that might be a better time to use that tool, again, in an area where you've kind of got a very defined edge. So we'll kind of reiterate that more later on, because we will be using the clone stamp tool as well. So you can kind of see already, and we'll be making lots of comparisons, how quickly I've been able to kind of target some of these different blemishes here and begin to basically heal them, removing them. So he's got a lot of these little kind of dark little spots. I'm just kind of targeting some of those. I like to remove the blemishes early on in the process. It just makes things a lot easier, especially when we get into removing wrinkles and things like that. Or if we have to move around any facial features, we've already got those blemishes out of the way. And so when I sample, I try to sample as close as I can, relatively close to whatever it is I'm removing or healing over, as you can see. Kind of getting some of these rogue hairs. So again, I'm just holding down Alt, sampling, and healing over. You've got some very fine kind of stray hair just up here on the forehead. So again, I don't want to worry about having this hair in the way later on. Just kind of healing over that there. And again, this is where having all layers turned on, it can be very useful. You wouldn't want to do this all on the original image, obviously. So if you're unhappy with the results, you can very easily scrap the layer altogether or just erase away whatever areas that you've healed and just didn't work out for you. Okay? All right, very cool. We can try another tool over here, which is the spot healing brush tool. This tool is pretty cool because you don't have to sample from any specific area. Basically, what the spot healing tool does is it quickly removes blemishes and any other imperfections in your photo. And it works very similar to the healing brush tool, as you can see. Kind of removing that right there, little spot that we saw. Okay, so it's sampling pixels from the image, and it matches the texture, the lighting, the transparency, and shading of those sample pixels to the pixels being healed. But unlike the healing brush tool, the spot healing brush doesn't require you to specify a sample spot. Okay, so it's basically kind of examining the surrounding area of whatever little selection here you paint, and it's pulling from that whole area around it to fill it in. Okay, so it's another useful little tool. Works great, again, on little blemishes. It's kind of cleaning up some of these little hairs that I see just kind of over around here. Now again, this is kind of a defined edge right there, so this is probably where I would use the clone stamp tool, just so I can get in there and make sure that that edge doesn't become fuzzy or kind of smudged or blurry, which can result if I were to use the healing brush tool right in here or the spot healing brush. Okay, same thing, just kind of coming up here to the edge of the eyebrow. All right, so we'll go ahead and make another comparison here. And you can see we've already made a lot of progress removing these major blemishes. In our next lesson, we'll focus on removing a lot of these wrinkles here in the cheek areas. So stick around, we'll see you then.